Hey, good morning, everybody. It's Tuesday, February 10th, 2026. It is 51 degrees outside on the mostly cloudy skies, and it looks like it's going to be raining in just a little bit, maybe sprinkling a bit. But yeah, it's 51 degrees and all that. And like I've said before, this weather is strange. I'll put it that way. But before we get started, I'd like to ask you to do me a solid favor, and that's like the video, ring the bell for notifications, subscribe to the channel, and share the video. Also, guys, click on the link in the description and on my YouTube homepage. You can find me elsewhere outside of YouTube. For example, you can find me at all your favorite audio and video podcast platforms like iTunes, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Spotify, Audible, Amazon Music, Radio Public, and to an extent SiriusXM, and maybe in the near future, potentially on Netflix because of the partnership with Spotify. Also, ladies and gentlemen, you can find me at other alternate video outlets like Rumble, Dailymotion, VENMO, and Odyssey. I also have a Patreon. If you want to check me out at Patreon, ladies and gentlemen, go ahead and do so. Basically, I'll get that up and running real soon. And what's going to be there is essentially content that you will see there first, 24 to 48 hours before it shows up here on YouTube or on any of the other video platforms I've mentioned, depending on, potentially it's, I guess you could say, what's the word I'm looking for? It's, I guess you could say viewer discretion. We'll put it that way. Also, ladies and gentlemen, I'm on other creative outlets as well. You can find me at DeviantArt at BVW1979, for Affinity at BW1979, and InkBunny.net at BWRosette. Also, ladies and gentlemen, I have a Cash App and a Venmo. If you want to, support me directly there, it would be greatly appreciated, especially in this time. It would really help me out. Really, really it would. And also, ladies and gentlemen, I have a couple of online stores. If you want to check those stores out, the links for them, like I said, are in the homepage as well as in the description. Click on those to find merchandise you can't get anywhere else. Click on the Fourth Wall store link. It's in the middle of the description. And the Teespring store link is near the bottom. Also, ladies and gentlemen, I will have some affiliated stores listed as well. So if you want to click on those affiliated stores, get something for you or your loved one in time for Valentine's Day and everything, go ahead and click on those affiliated stores. It helps you out finding what you need for this Valentine's Day weekend and helps me out, via commission. So please go ahead and do so. Also, ladies and gentlemen, you can find me at other social media outlets like TikTok, Blue Sky, and Twitter, aka X.com, all under BWRosette. Also, ladies and gentlemen, during this live video premiere, you can channel me your thoughts in the live chat. Give your thoughts on what I have to say here, as well as super chats are going to be open during the live chat or during the live video premiere. So if you want to get your live chat in, your thoughts and everything in there, along with helping out the channel, go ahead and do so. Super chats are open. Comment section is going to be open, I should say. Comment section will be open on both the live video premiere and afterwards. And if you still want to help donate to the channel after the video premiere is over, if you don't get here in time for that, then you can do so, ladies and gentlemen, through the Super Thanks option, which is the little heart with the dollar sign in the middle. But with that said, though, folks, let's get on to the topic at hand. One I'm sure a lot of fans are excited about. Okay, guys, so today is the day. Now, in case you haven't been following, the Sonic the Hedgehog official YouTube channel has been uploading a weekly radio drama, if you will, on its channel week by week. And it's not Sonic based. Well, it's Sonic based, yes. But it's mostly focused on the Chaotix. That being Vector, SBO, and Charmy. And what's interesting about it is each week, is another chapter. You know how you hear about the old school radio dramas, right? How everything is always like tune in next week or tune in tomorrow for what happens next, because they had potentially a limited amount of time back in that era. Well, essentially you kind of get that here, but it's more like in the episodic form of 22 minutes to 25 minutes, depending. Anyway, long story short, they are basically putting out a series of episodes, episodic radio drama episodes, focusing mainly on their 30th anniversary, or at least taking inspiration from the 30th anniversary IDW comic, which introduced a villainess. You can kind of maybe say, she's like a Catwoman-like character, if you will, just by the fact that She kind of likes the idea, a little bit of spoiler, she likes the idea of having competent rivals now to go against, to try to, win a chess match with, a chess match against and all that, checkmate them and all that. And I think the character's name is Enigma or something like that. Or at least that's her alter ego's villain name or something. And she's basically like she's kind of like the assistant. She portrays herself kind of like the curator's assistant, if you will. And again, she is found out by Vector when he tosses a card back to her saying, oh, don't forget this, and basically reveals that, hey, I know who you are. So the next time we meet, you won't have such an easy time going after what you want to go after. And again, it paints her in a light that's very, Catwomanish, if you will. And whether or not they decide, hey, let's just, have her be a thief for a little bit, but then have her turn good, that's going to be up to them as we approach the 100th issue. But, yeah, basically, that's what, that's the story they're adapting here and everything. And yes, it is the story that in the final panel, you had that little cameo shot background, from the back of Sally. So that's where she kind of like slightly officially made her debut in IDW by a cameo. But that wasn't the big thing people were talking about. No. What people were talking about was today's episode coming up. You see, today's episode was significant because this month is the month that Tangle and Whisper, Tangle the Lemur and Whisper the Wolf, are going to make the video game console debut as part of Sonic's Crossworlds Racing, or Racing Crossworlds, if you will. They're going to make their debut this month. But when they were showcased, in a trailer of being one of the free DLCs that are coming down the pipeline, they didn't have no, voices or any kind of sound effect. They had sound effects, but they didn't have like voices or that, where you would expect them to say something and everything, right? They didn't have that. Here in this debut, here in this third episode of the Chaotic, I think, what is it called? The Chaotic Conspiracies, I think? Let me check. If you will, I just want to make sure. Or the Chaotic Case Files. This, in the third episode called The Case of the Malicious, the Case of the Malicious Museum Misdirection. Malicious, I guess that's the word, Malicious Museum Misdirection. Here, the reason this one is significant, and again, this is the reason they've been hyping this up a lot, and how it ties into Crossworlds, is the fact that this is the debut of the official VAs, or at least we can look at it that way, of Tangle and Whisper. That's right, because like I said, when they were teased in the trailer of, hey, they're going to be in the Crossworlds game, no voices, right? But here, after 8 years, almost a decade and 2 years, believe it or not, a little over 2 years, since they debuted, now they finally have VAs. They finally have voice actors, or actresses, if you will. And honestly, I have to agree with a lot of people. They sound really good. And they do sound exactly how you feel they would be represented. Tangle, her voice actress, definitely nailed her character. They nailed Tangle as being very bubbly and, basically energetic. Basically, in a way, like I said, very bubbly, energetic, very just, let's get to it, let's do it, man. Just fun-loving, positive attitude. And Whisper, they got down perfectly because it's kind of a shy tone. Like, you can kind of tell she's gonna build it up. Like, I think when the comics finally have her just speaking regularly, much to the surprise of everybody, maybe not Tangle, but to everybody, when they have her start getting back into that Whisper of old, then I think we're gonna see that progress, in the further VA representation. But the way they got her, nailed down here in the very shy, timid voice, very well done. Basically, and like I said, it's exactly how all of us pretty much pictured they would sound. Tangle being like, "Hey guys, what's up? Let's do this." Very excited, very bubbly. Whisper more like, "Hi, how you doing?" Very shy, timid, reserved. But the voices work. The voices work. And here's what's interesting. Now, I read the names, but I did not know. I did not know exactly what connection they would have or why people were excited about this. But Tangle is voiced by Ashley Madden, who is known as Nira from Freedom Planet. And Anaris Corneros, Corneros, I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, is Whisper. Now, what's interesting, I'm looking over the comments and everything. Um, people are liking what they said, and even one person saying Tangle being charming, supportive big sister is everything to me. So obviously, she's, he looks up to her and all that. You know, and some people are saying, "Oh my God, they sound exactly how I heard them in my mind." Because a lot of people, when they would read the comics and they would see, they would read what they would say. Like, let's say with the Tangle and Whisper miniseries, which, by the way, you can get the trade paperback of. I'm gonna probably have it listed here. Basically, a lot of people would picture what they sound like in their mind, from a very timid, shy tone with Whisper and the bubbly expressionariness of Tangle. Now you can only imagine, how Whisper's voice actress is going to take it up a notch if, let's say, they decide, here on the official YouTube page of Sonic, hey, let's adapt the Metal Virus arc and really freak people out by having, a redoing in a retelling, if not an animated sequence of Tangle being infected. Imagine the growth, if you will. Imagine that sound coming out, if you will. But yeah, it's pretty cool. And it's one person saying that they think people even in the Sonic universe forget that Whisper is, chronologically an assassin. Well, in a way, yeah, she is, chronologically an assassin, if you will, but for good. But for good. Anyway, though, yeah, a lot of people were happy about this. A lot of people were happy to hear the voices and everything. And what's interesting is you have other people bringing up other roles that these two ladies had as well. Not just from Freedom Planet, but somebody said you might recognize you might recognize Quininos, if you will, that being the Aneris, if you will, Aneris. They just edited it, didn't they? Oh, that's weird. Didn't look like they edited it earlier, but I think they just edited it. They just edited it. But yeah, you have Aneris Corninos, who's known as Mirko from Academia, and Harriet from RWBY as Whisper. She has some notable voice actresses from animes, from My Hero Academia, as Miyako, and Harriet from RWBY as Whisper. You have Anarias Coninos, who voiced Miko from My Hero Academia, and Harriet from RWBY voicing Whisper, and you have Ashley Madden, voice of Nira from Freedom Planet, as Tangled. And again, I have to admit they did a really good job. They basically nailed what a lot of people, even one person, said in their mind. What the characters would sound like. And it looks like Aneris Kuninos also voiced Akia, if you will, in I Don't Want to Be a Magical Girl. And then one person's excited, questioning in excitement, Miko is Whisper? So yeah. And then somebody else is bringing up, I know Whisper as Strawberry Cookie from Cookie Run Kingdom. And then one person is reacting, are you serious? The Nira? as in the ice-wielding trusted advisor of the Royal Majesty of Freedom Planet, Nira. So yeah, basically they got very recognizable, very recognizable voice actresses from certain animes and fan projects and everything, and other outlets, if you will, connected to Sonic and not connected to Sonic, to voice Tangle and Whisper. And like I said, a lot of people have agreed, and I'm with them on this, that they sound exactly how you pictured them in your mind. Tangle is very bubbly, energetic, expressionary, exciting, excitable, wanting to, get things done, let's do it to it kind of deal. And Whisper's more reserved, more shy, more timid, in her voice and everything. But I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think over time, when they start letting her be more expressionary and kind of rebuild her back to being what she was in the past, especially with Tangle, I think the voice actors in Iris, if that's going to be her official VA, they're going to allow her to be more expressionary in that nature. So just imagine what the characters, as some people pointed out, like Miko from basically Academia, and Harriet from RWBY, and Ikea from I Don't Want to Be a Magical Girl. Imagine what they sound like, or not imagine, but go back and listen to how they sound like expressionary from a very excitable, bubbly kind of side, and picture that with a potential opportunity for Whisper to get to that level via the comics, and then by extension into a VA role for another radio YouTube drama, or podcast drama, if you will, or maybe another game role where they'll have a speaking role outside of outside of racing cross roles, if you will. But yeah, a lot of people are happy about this. I'm happy about it because despite how you feel about IDW and how it's being shown a lot more favoritism than Archie was, this is a good sign. This is really, a really a good sign, because when you think about it, for one moment, Freedom Planet, ladies and gentlemen, actually, and this is fact, actually has some kind of fan canonical connection, canonical connection to Sonic. It kind of has that. It was kind of spun off from Sonic. It was inspired by Sonic, and I think it originally was supposed to be a take on Sonic, if you will. That's what That's how much Freedom Planet means to the Sonic fan base, and to see someone who voices a character in there come in and voice Tangle here, one of these two characters, in that case Tangle, I should say, like I was saying, you can't blame them for being excited, but also what it does by bringing in that person from that genre, from that franchise, if you will, that started out as a fan project, I think, that was going to, like I say, tie into being something Sonic related. That right there is a sign that what Sega said, in the past, despite whether you believe them or not, it's actually turning out to be true. That they're going to take everything Sonic lore-wise, in the coming years, mostly this year, the 35th anniversary year, and they're going to incorporate it into the Sonic games, or any Sonic game-related material, if not non-game related material, if you will. So, so yeah, this is definitely a good sign, and who knows? Who knows? Over time, we might get the Freedom Fighters. We might get, Sally. We might get Bunny. We might, get Dulcie, Antoine, Lupe, and all of them. We might get them down the line. You never know. You never know. But to me, this is a good start. This is a good start. And this is only maybe the first step. And who knows? Maybe the reason they got these two to be the voice actors, maybe the reason they hired them on, is potentially if they're going to do another Sonic animated series, which I think there has been talks about, happening, that if that becomes a reality, Tangle and Whisper will be part of it, and by being part of it, you already have the voice actresses set in stone. Well, not necessarily set in stone, but you have the voice actresses for right now set to bring those characters to life. If, let's say, another animated Sonic show, which, like I said, has been talked about being in the works, potentially in happening, comes to pass, and these two show up in it, pretty much you already set the foundation for who's, what they're going to sound like and who might, bring them to life via, via script reading and all that, and voice recording and all that for episodes, if you know what I mean. Anyway, though, again, good sign, good first step, and here's to many more steps in the future. Here's to many more steps, if you will. We know that other characters that need from IDW that potentially get some voices once they get incorporated into the Chaotix case files and maybe other radio drama like spin-offs. We know other characters like Surge and Kit, they got to get some voices, if you will. They got to get some voices, as as well as Dr. Starline, if you will. He's got to get a voice and everything. So we know there's more characters. Jules got to get one. Lanolin's got to get one. So we know there's a lot more characters they're going to probably bring in, and they're going to be who's going to be voiced as who's going to be given some voices as well. And I think when you really look at this chaotic case files radio drama, it's pretty much, in my opinion, I think it's like a testing ground, as I alluded to earlier. There has been talk of another animated Sonic show. So this case files thing might be a testing ground to not only introduce certain characters, out of the comics, like IDW, and maybe even if they want to, reach into the depths of the lore of, Sonic and bring out, certain freedom fighter characters, so princesses, if you know what I mean. This might be a testing ground to see how fans will react to them, not only having speaking, not only finally having some speaking roles, if you will, but also the fact that, it's a testing ground to see how fans will react to them, being in such roles, in such, episodic situations, if you will. So, yeah, I think that's what this is. I think that's what the case files is a testing ground to see how people will, relate, and not relate, well, not just relate, but kind of, be, how people will react. That's the word I'm looking for. Not just relate, but react, to these characters, being in episodic adventures, not just radio dramas, but also potentially maybe if that animated show, which has been talked about, comes to be and becomes a reality, how they'll react if they make that jump as well. And let's not forget, too, there's the Sonic movies, and you got that Sonic Universe movie that's been talked about, so who knows, you might see them in there as well. But to me, it's good to see that they finally have voices, apparently very notable VAs from certain animes and other, projects as well. Very cool to hear. And let me know what your thoughts are, guys. Let me know how you feel about it and everything. And also, let me know who you feel should be next on the list from IDW to be brought in. And who do you think should voice maybe Jewel, Lanolin, and mostly Surge and Kit? Who do you think should voice them? Let me know down in the comments if you haven't already in the live chat and everything. And until next time, guys, Super Thanks will be open in just a bit if you didn't do a Super Chat. Super Thanks will be open after the video is over here. But give me your thoughts. How do you feel about Tangle and Whisper finally having voices? And do you think this is like the first step to, potentially them being the official, these being the official VAs for the characters going forward? And also, what are your thoughts on the fact that the Chaotic Case Files is probably just a testing ground for future, episodic adventures, not just from a radio drama perspective, but potentially an animated perspective if that does become reality, if that rumor becomes real, and potentially maybe a testing ground to see how the VA actresses for Tangle and Whisper could sound if, let's say, they want to make that jump to the live action scene, if you will. Let me know, guys, and do you think maybe this will also be a sign that maybe they might bring in some of the other characters from the other comic line and Satayam line? What are your thoughts? Let me know down below. And again, who do you think out of the IDW lineup, not just Archie, but IDW mostly, because that's the focus right now, do you think should be next? And who do you think would be a good voice actor or actresses for those characters? Let me know, and until next time, guys, I will talk to y'all later. Click on the links in the description, find my content elsewhere outside of YouTube, and support me outside of YouTube as well. And until then, I am out.